Okay, so let's start. So this week, as I mentioned last lecture, I'm going to talk about some methodological issues and how to design a solid comparative research design. What do you need to know at this point in order to design a solid research comparative framework? I've received like a couple of emails inquiring about how to deal with the material and how to study this course. So basically, I know like there is no textbook for this course, so you need to have your own what I mentioned, like synopsis or a summary. So you need just to understand, because I'm sure that you are worried about the final exam and the coursework. So you will be trained throughout the course in my type of questions. So basically, I structure my lectures in a way just to help you understand the material and to help you, to give you like the basic knowledge and to explain, you know, some facts and to elaborate on some examples in order to make sure that you understand what I say. But the exam questions would be like a different focus and different emphasis. For example, I'm not going to ask you, please tell me how the field of comparative politics historically developed before the Second World War and after the Second World War. So this is like for the sake of explanation and for the sake of like simplification or understanding. So you need just to understand that the scope of inquiry just differed before and after the Second World War. And until now, there is no kind of consensus or a paradigm. You need just to understand all these facts, and then you can write down your own summary. Okay, because I'm not gonna ask you it's not from the slides. Yeah, the exams or the exam questions. I'm not gonna like derive, you know, some questions or from the knowledge, you know, I delivered. You are gonna use it, but you have to develop your own skills how to deal with the knowledge and the facts, you know, you learned about. So I'm not gonna ask you, you know what? Please tell me what Alman said about separate tables. I'm not going to ask you this kind of question, but perhaps I can ask you a different question, like throughout, you know, the history of from the 50s, for example, the field has developed, and the comparativist actually broadened the scope of the inquiry, but they still, you know, they didn't agree on particular methodological tools or particular focus to handle or to tackle socioeconomic phenomena. So can you explain this, or can you reflect on this? So I'll give you space to deal with the knowledge, you know, you learned about, and this is your own way to structure your answer. You might come up with a totally different structure. So you see my point? So this is not like, you know, this is heading and this is subheading, and you're going to have a question about, you know, these subheadings in the final. For the reaction paper, I'm going to talk more about this next week. But mainly, you need to understand the main premises or the assumptions of the theories. Okay, and this is your own way to articulate or to express, you know, what are the main foundations or the main premises, and how can we apply this to some empirical cases or empirical facts. Yeah. Who's talking?
Sorry for interruption, but I want to know, do you mean all the study of the course depend on my notes only?
You're not from the readings. Okay?
From the readings and the lecture?
They are not, by the way, they are not. If you already did the readings, you would have discovered that there is no like a difference between both of them. I just, you know, explain the material and I use different examples.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, because I'm not here just to memorize or tasmiya what's already there in the material. Okay, this is my my job, you know, how to explain and how to elaborate.
Okay, doctor.
Okay, I know that it's a bit difficult because there is no like a textbook, so that's why it's a little bit confusing for you at this point, because I think this is like the first course, you know, you follow, that you don't have like a book to study from. Okay, so Okay, so can you guys remind me about what I said last lecture about, this disagreement on methodological tools and ideological orientations of comparativist or political scientists? Anyone? Did you do the readings? Okay, so before you ask about how to deal with the material, you have to do your homework. Okay, so you have to do the readings first before you can ask how can you deal, with the material, and for just to move between the lectures and the readings. So generally speaking, just to remind you quickly about what I said last lecture, there is kind of disagreement between political scientists with regard to methodological tools and ideological orientations. When I talked about the soft and hard with regard to the methodological tools and the ideologically left and right, and then we have four categories: soft right, soft left, hard right, hard left. But the separation that was that it was not that rigid and that neat in reality. The separation is kind of it's real, but it's not that firm or strict in reality, because political scientists are open to different methodological tools, and they are liberal in their ideological predispositions or orientations. Do you remember the table, right? So, and then I highlighted this great cafeteria of the center where political scientists actually would place themselves, with regard to this kind of liberalism and new commitment to a specific ideological path, and this disagreement on whether or not we can separate knowledge from action. And then the behavioralists, they didn't actually believe in this value-oriented science or value-oriented knowledge, but post-behavioralists, they are still behavioralist and positivist, but they do believe in this inseparable nature between knowledge and action. And then they introduced this idea of relevance, that we can do political science in order to have some sort of policy implications and to put this to work in order to shape or to push, the society, or to make it to help, with its advancement. Okay, so the history or the dream has always been centered on this idea of finding law-like or just to generalization, or to make this, to grapple with some sort of patterns or regularities in order to make this causal explanations. So before we study, or before we go study in some detail the three theoretical major, or the three major schools in comparative politics, I need to highlight some early efforts or attempts at formulating this kind of generalization or general laws in comparative politics. So before we look deeper, or to dig deeper into rational choice and structuralism and culturalism and then new institutionalism, there actually had been some sort of efforts in order to study regularities and pattern and to come up with a general theory in comparative politics. So one of the early effort was studying from driving some, or making inference from the study of the Social Democratic Party in Germany, how to study extensive and vast bureaucratic structure. And then Mitchell came up with this iron law of oligarchy, meaning in these kind of vast bureaucratic and organizations and institutions, decision maker or power would lie in or would be gravitated to the top personnel or the top hierarchy of these institutions in order to make decisions. And then he made this general theoretical statement about the iron law of oligarchy. Easton as well, one of the two early efforts as well came from Easton and Gabriel Almond, and they tried to study political system to come up with this general statement or theoretical claims about how political system operates and what kind of interactions between different subsystems would stabilize or destabilize political systems. So firstly, like this Easton's analysis, he adopted this ahistorical view in order to come up with a general law. So this is like, I made, this graph in order to help you understand. So basically, a society is a kind of inclusive system or all-encompassing system that would include political systems as a subsystem, social systems and economic systems and cultural systems. So this is like the society in its totality. And political system is kind of an abstraction of this society, and different like social system and economic system and cultural system. So this separation is kind of arbitrary for analytical purpose, but there is kind of interconnectedness or interaction between these subsystems or political, economic, social, and cultural systems. So departing from this idea, like system analysis is centered on the idea that each system has some key variables. We need to understand the interaction between these variables. What are these variables? Some sort of structures, functions, actors, norms, values, inputs, outputs, response, and feedback. So let me show you the diagram first. So what Easton mentioned, this is the political system, okay? And then you need to look into the individual perceptions and demands that would represent the inputs to this political system, and then how political system functions. The political system actually receives these individual or group demands, and then transform these demands into outputs in a form of binding decisions or authority actions. So, and these kind of inputs, they actually come from like micro individual on the micro level of individual perceptions or motivations, or from the environment. And this environment would include like this economic or cultural and social environment would help in articulating more demands. And then the system, the political system, would absorb or would take these demands in order to transform or translate these demands into binding decision or authoritative allocation of resources or values in order to make these binding decisions. And then from this outputs, there is kind of a feedback that it would be positive or negative. And positive feedback would manifest itself in support, in regime support. So people would be happy about how the regime responded to their demands. So that's why they would give support to the system, and the system would be in kind of a political equilibrium. Or negative feedback, it would be in a new circle of demands. So of the regime, if the political system actually didn't respond well to the inputs or to the demands of the people, they would like generate more round or more circle of demands and so forth. So he actually tried to make this general statement. But the problem is it's still like mechanical analysis, like this input output. This analysis or this kind of framework or generalization about how political system functions, it didn't actually tell us about the dynamics by which political system in a form of a bureaucratic apparatus or elite circle, how they actually transform or translate these demands into binding decisions or authoritative actions. So it's kind of, it's still like mechanical, and it didn't help us I'm gonna explain this shortly, but this kind of, you see this square, or what the analysis says, it's a black box. It didn't tell us what's really going on in this black box, how political elites or state apparatuses actually receive these demands in order to transform them into binding decisions. And it didn't explain as well any sort of political instability. As the analysis says, this negative feedback would generate some sort of new demands, and regimes or political systems that are kind of in crisis, they would sustain or would endure. But how these political systems actually would survive any sort of political crisis or legitimacy crisis from this negative feedback. But still, that was some sort of early effort at building general or generalization, or to come up with a general law in political science or in comparative politics. Okay, and this actually inspired some what they call like a structural functional analysis, but they actually focus mainly on institutional and how like government institutions actually function or operate. So Gabriel Almond as well, he actually maintained the essence of this system analysis in order to come up with a middle range theory about how political system functions and how to interpret this interaction that would like give rise to this kind of political balance or political equilibrium. So he actually focused again on this roles, structures, and functions, and then he developed this later with Kalman. But here you have the graph. So he kept or retained the same, the essence of inputs and outputs of this political system, but the content or the substance is a little bit different. So he actually mentioned that different demands or different inputs, political systems, all political systems that are multifunctional, they have to deal with these demands. What kind of demands in a form of inputs political systems would deal with? So first of all, this kind of political socialization and recruitment in a form of basically political parties. Like political parties would have a different political platform and socialize people, or to train people in indoctrinate people in particular, ideological orientation or ideological setting that would help them participate or actively engage in political dynamics or political process. So it's kind of it's a need or a demand for participation, and then how to articulate or to express their interest, how to, in a form of voting, in a form of reaching out to parliamentary candidates, or in what form people would actually have like a partisan representative in order to articulate their interest or to express their interest, and then how to aggregate their interest in order to put them or to get access to decision-making circles in the political system to respond to these demands. And then this sort of political communication, mainly like political parties, leaders that would actually get access to parliament or the legislative branch in order to represent and articulate the interest of their constituencies. And then the political system would respond. Initially, he made this effort, Almond, that the outputs would be in a form of rule making, how actually the system responds to these inputs by rule making, rule application, or rule adjudication. These outputs actually correspond to the three branches of the government: legislature, executive, legislature, rule making, how to promulgate and to issue rules in order to respond to people's demands for participation and interest, or application, and then the executive that would implement these rules, and then adjudication, the judiciary, how actually the judicial branch would solve or mediate, this kind of disputes between different citizens. And then he actually like renovated these outputs, and he mentioned from these inputs, the outputs would take a form of this extraction, regulations, and distribution. So the authority, or what kind of authoritative action political systems would actually take, it was like extraction, how political systems actually would extract resources in a form of taxes, how to impose, kind of taxes on citizens in order to finance or to fund their social spending or any other sort of public spending. Regulation, what kind of regulations political system would initiate or would issue in order to discipline society or to help society to participate in a legitimate form or in a legitimate way. And then this distribution, how political system actually would distribute the material resources or some material benefits in a particular society. So it's still like functional. He kept, the emphasis on this input and inputs and outputs, and it didn't actually. It's still functional analysis. Like from these outputs, you can tell to what extent the regime or the political system actually responds to people's or groups' demands. And actually, he was inspired. I'm going to talk about this more after in the very last week, when we finish all the theoretical schools, and to offer some sort of detailed critique to these kind of theoretical schools and theoretical attempts. But actually, he was inspired by sociologists that actually made some sort of dichotomous analysis about how society and how, like, some sort
Doctor.
Sorry?
Doctor, I have a question.
Okay, after I finish the slide, I'll take your questions, okay?
Okay.
Yeah. And then mainly from Talcott Parsons, and I'm going to talk more about this perhaps after we finish structuralism, or after the week of structural analysis or structural theory. But for now, from this kind of multifunctional society or multifunctional system and the effect of the cultural environment, that this actually inspired Gabriel Allman to relate political system later to political culture. And we will study this in some detail in not the next week, the one after, when we study the civic culture and the cultural school. But here it's kind of, they try to make this general statement, or to come up with this general law about how political system functions, but it's still some sort of static analysis. It doesn't help us understand the mechanisms by which political systems would actually respond and to take on board why political elites actually would take on board these demands, and how these inputs would be transformed or translated into outputs. And if you remember what I said about, Marxism and the scientific principle of the dialectical analysis of Marxism, for some it's still kind of functional analysis, a structural functional analysis about, this kind of thesis, antithesis, and how the political systems would face some sort of crisis that would eventually lead to its collapse and the emergence of new sort of new relations or new mode of new economic structures or new mode of production and new relations of production. But we are going to talk more about, this structural analysis and the critique of this functionalism when we talk about structural analysis. We have one question?
Yes, doctor, I have one question.
Who's talking?
Yara.
Yara, okay.
Is the difference between David Easton and Allman the components of inputs and outputs?
It's here you have it was actually more detailed about this kind of what sort of demands, this would be driven from the environment or would be articulated from the individual perceptions or motivations. But basically it's here kind of, it took a form of like group demands or something like that. Okay.
Okay, doctor, thank you.
And here you have like it's more elaboration, but the essence is the same. Any more questions?
Doctor?
Yeah.
هو Easton وAlman and Mitchell, all of them followed which criteria of the four?
Which four?
Soft left, soft right, and hard left, hard
As I
right.
mentioned, it's kind of, yeah, okay. Why the reason behind why I'm explaining this to you, that the rational choice and the three schools we are gonna like explain or in some detail, or we are gonna like spend like almost the semester explaining them. These are not like the only effort at building a theory in comparative politics. Okay, so it was mainly about there are some other efforts preceded this kind of when it's not preceded, but it was actually because rational choice actually it gained some sort of predominance in the 50s, but these attempts actually they tried to make political science kind of more scientific and to come up with this kind of general laws. Okay,
Doctor, thank you.
But you can make up your mind about this. They are not leftist for sure.
Yes.
Okay, with these kind of methodological tools, there is kind of, but you need to. That's why I defer this, until the last week in order to talk more about the criticism, because I need you to finish your methodology course first and to absorb, all the information about rational choice and structuralism and institutionalism before I look deeper into the criticism of this functional analysis. But I'll talk more about this in the last week.
Okay, Doctor, thank you.
Okay, but you get the idea about this kind of general theory about how political system functions, right?
Yes. يعني دول يعتبر categorization غير دي، يعني هو دول بيديفاينوا مثلا political science ماشية ازاي، ودول حاجة تانية. Okay.
No, I didn't get your point. Can you repeat it?
هو اللي أنا فهمته إنه التقسيمة بتاعت ألمان وميتشل وكده دول بيديفاينوا البوليتيكال ساينس بوجهة نظر غير اللي هم بيقولوا الفور كاتيجوريز بتاعت السوفت رايت والسوفت ليفت وكده، صح ولا؟
They are not any reflection on this, guys? So they try to come up with a general law in order to make political science or the field of comparative politics kind of sciencey or something like that, to come up with a theory, okay, in order to make it like scientific, okay? So they are not like related to this socialist path, okay? So I mean, okay, so you got confused about this separate table and you need to categorize all the, okay. So the main rationale behind this separate table, just to mention that there is kind of, there are divisions between political scientists, different kind of theoretical orientations that actually predicate, these orientations are predicated on ideological orientations and their perception of methodological tools needed to come up with a theory, okay? But at the end of the day, political scientists, they would place themselves in the center, which is like the great cafeteria of the center, or I'll go back to the idea of the messy center, okay? So messy center that you can have different methodological tools, not necessarily statistics or experimental as the hard right would say, okay? So you still believe in making political science a science, okay? Just to achieve, this scientific stage without necessarily implementing or deploying these kind of statistical techniques or mathematical models, okay? So you can come up with a general theory without being that hard in your methodological tools, okay? You can diversify your methodological tools, okay? But of course, these analyses, they are not related to this kind of soft right that they focus on Leo Strauss, for example, on text analysis, that the truth lies in the text. Okay, so they try to come up with a general theory about political system, how political system operates or functions. Okay, so this is not a text analysis, and this is not a narrative. They are not trying to generate a narrative about political system or a specific president or political leader, how these leaders actually receive these inputs in whatever form, and transform these inputs into authoritative decisions or binding decisions. So you understand?
Yes, I get it, Doctor. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. You will understand more because I'm going to talk about some methodological issues, or what I call the foundation of this kind of methodological debates, ontological and epistemological, and you're gonna absorb the idea more efficiently. Okay. So comparative research design, as I mentioned last week, it's hardly a random process. You need some sort of guidance in order to formulate a solid comparative framework of research design. You guys in your methodology course, you studied that there is kind of an independent variable and dependent variable, X and Y, or still not?
No, we didn't have it.
You didn't?
Excellent.
Okay. So the main idea about doing comparative research, we focus mainly on this, Okay, keep this, and I'll go back to this again. But here you need to explain some sort of causality. So the relationship, if you remember, we are studying kind of a relationship between two phenomena. So you need to understand civil war, for example, and what affects civil war. So this is like a cause and effect. So you have like your independent variable is X and the outcome variable is Y. Y is the civil war, and here X, for example.
معلش يارا بس خرجت عشان كان عندها problem بس في الصوت فعايزة تدخل تاني.
Okay.
يارا طارق.
Okay. I'll admit her when she logged in. Okay, so basically here you have like X and Y, your independent and dependent variable. Yara Tariq?
Yes, doctor.
Okay. Okay, so you have two variables. This is your X, your independent variable, and Y, your dependent variable. You need to explain, or you need to understand and to come up with this general theoretical statement about it, like civil war, for example. You need what affects civil war. So that's why you need like independent variable, explanatory variable to explain why this and how actually civil war happens. And for example, like deprivation theory or minority rule, for example. So if a country, a specific like ethnic group, monopolized or had control over power, in some sort of in crisis situation, the majority population would, the majority population would place some sort of pressure or place some sort of economic demands on the national government. And then this kind of ethnic groups would defend their own minority government. And then this would lead to some sort of clash between the minority groups and the majority groups. And this would like descend the country into this civil war, would lead to this civil war. So by explaining like crisis situation like A, okay, and how different groups would respond to this crisis situation, like economic crisis or mass mobilizations, popular demonstrations, how different groups, how these groups actually interact in these crisis situations, and how actually political leadership or political regime responded to this by like harsh crackdown or offering some concessions to these groups. So by A and B and C, these are like the causal mechanisms by which you need to examine how X causes Y. Okay, and this is how you explain, you unravel somehow this kind of causal, this complex causality, A, B, and C, in order to tell us how your research would tell us how this kind of minority rule in crisis situation would lead to a civil war in some countries.
يعني دكتور
Yeah.
يعني the civil war is our X and the causes or the reasons of the civil war is Y. صح كده؟
Say it again.
يعني دلوقتي حضرتك قلتي ان في ان A B and C دول
mechanisms.
يس اللي احنا هنعرف بيهم ازاي السيفل وور دي حصلت، او يعني ايه الافكتس او reasons اللي حصلت السيفل وور دي، صح؟
Yeah.
فهي هيبقى
So the civil war is the outcome, right?
بالظبط ده اللي انا عايزه اوصله.
Yeah, this is your dependent variable you need to explain. Okay.
Independent variable ولا
dependent variable is the outcome the Y. Okay, you need to yeah.
Okay.
So you need some explanatory variables to explain why. Okay.
Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. So like comparative politics would help you. You need to develop these kind of skills that this actually helps you think critically and to digest and absorb some particular characteristics about foreign countries. So it's not only about studying or collecting some facts about foreign countries, but this is how you process this mentally and thoroughly, how you process these kind of facts and information in order to come up with this research design. For example, during the unity period between Syria and Egypt, so Nasser actually implemented some sort of mild, relative to or comparing to Syria, he actually implemented some sort of less repressive arrangements with regard to trade unions and peasants' confederation or business associations. In Syria, during the unity period between the two countries, so the same legal arrangements that actually exported or Egypt actually transferred to Syria, these arrangements were much harsher than the ones initiated or implemented in Egypt. So you need to understand why the same policies implemented by the same political leadership in Egypt or in Syria, these policies were much harsher than the ones initiated in Egypt. Okay, so that's why you need to collect some facts about the society in Syria, and then you may come up with this kind of peculiar characteristics about Syrian society or Syrian politics. So during that period, Syria had like a strong capitalist groups and strong Sunni merchants that actually was very difficult for any Ba'ath regime or even after the republic, after the unity, it was very difficult for Nasser to deal with. So that's why this kind of it's called, I'm gonna explain this later, but for now it's corporatist arrangements, how to actually control these associations and these social groups, the measures or the legal framework in order to control these groups was much harsher than the ones implemented in Egypt, despite the fact that the same political leadership implemented the same policies, but in different contexts, it led to a high level of repression or different degrees of repression if you look into the degree of autonomy of different social groups. So this would help you analyze what's special about Syria during that period. Okay, so it helps you to evaluate and understand these kind of similarities and differences between the two contexts. not only gathering facts or collecting some information about Syrian society or Syrian political regime, but how can you deal and what can you do with this kind of with these facts and the knowledge or with the information in order to produce some sort of knowledge. And this actually one preceding step, you need to avail yourself or to be aware of all these details. So you need to study in some detail, the characteristics of different countries in order to come up with this solid comparative framework. And in the process, you need actually to you will study this in your methodology course, that there are some sort of biases or selection from your case selection to the facts, or what kind of facts you filter.
Yes,
and
we
what
already
kind of,
studied.
you already studied, yeah, okay. So like in order to come up with this kind of solid framework, you need to deploy or to apply reason rather than being kind of emotionally responsive to this. So you need to be somehow impartial, because it's debatable in political science or between political scientists, as we are going to see. But impartiality is kind of essential step in order to have plausible and objective analysis. And you need to be much more precise and to consider different viewpoints and different you would see, this kind of social and political phenomena from different angles. And this is essential when in your methodology course, you will learn how to deal with the alternative explanations. Okay, I'm going to explain this in shortly. If you remember, when we control some variables, you can control the differences between the Arab Socialist Union under Nasser here in Egypt and the Ba'ath Party. You would control for the legacy of state building and the national liberation movements in order to qualify this kind of degree of autonomy of social forces to be responsible or to account for the outcome, why the corporate arrangements were much more repressive and harsher in Syria than Egypt during that period. So you need to consider alternative explanations or different viewpoints in order to and be critical. You have to offer an explanation and justification why you control or why you rule out these alternative explanations and these other variables. And this would help you eventually come up with this causal explanations as like the hard line or the scientific or objective orientation would say, and the soft science or the culturalist analysis that would understand the meaning would help you develop some sort of deep understanding about social and political phenomena. Any question? Okay. So you do comparative politics, and you need to design a comparative research design. So how many cases? It's a comparative. It entails or involves, like, you have so many kind of cases in order to compare with, right? So can we consider a single case like it would like fall into this category of comparative politics? Anyone? If we study one single case, can we consider this is still comparative analysis?
No, because
No,
we can't.
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
We should compare between at least two.
Okay. More opinions here?
Yes.
Yeah?
Doctor, we can compare in one country two different political systems.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I mean, for example, in Egypt, okay, we have Nasser and the socialist movement, and then we have Sadat and his affiliation to free market.
So you can compare between different time periods within a country, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So one single case would be considered a comparative analysis as well, but for different purpose. If you remember when I talked about the purpose of doing comparative research or doing comparative analysis, So it depends on your purpose, why you design this research. So it depends on the purpose of your research or your study. So you can design your research based on even one particular case, but you should have your own justification why you have this. But it's still debatable, single case, why we have single case, large N, how many cases, large N or small N, and what can we do with this study, what kind of inference we can make from these kind of research designs. So you have Ledgepart here. He mentioned some sort of different comparative research design for different purposes, and even one single case, it would be like a stepping stone, or it has some sort of empirical and theoretical implications for future research. For example, if you care about, if you are interested in a particular social leadership, like as I mentioned, Zapata in the Mexican Revolution, Nasser, for example, how actually the free officers movement, and then you just need to examine this particular case, and you need to offer some descriptive analysis or to gather some data because you are interested in this case, and then you can have some theoretical implications, how some sort of effective communication or local organizations helped, like Zapata, in order to organize peasants' movements in Mexico and to sustain their struggle for social reforms in Mexico between 1911 and for some sort of a decade or 2 decades in order to achieve what they actually asked for. So it might be a theoretical case study. You just need to gather some information or facts about this particular case study, and you need to examine in some detail the main characteristics or what's peculiar about these cases, and this would have some empirical and theoretical implications as well. Perhaps like charismatic, different forms of social, different forms of political leaderships or different leading tools would establish different sort of social authority, like charismatic leadership, for example, against or versus legal and rational leadership. So you see, you started out with this kind of a theoretical purpose in order to examine one particular case, and you ended up with this theoretical implications from your initial study. Or interpretive case studies. You need already existing theories or already existing theoretical frameworks. You need to apply these frameworks to some sort of empirical or comparative cases. For example, indigenous movements in Latin America. People managed in Bolivia, for example, they developed their own local organizations in order to mobilize against national authority, and eventually one of the indigenous leaders reached power in Bolivia. So you need to understand how indigenous people in Bolivia, after I finish this, I'll take your questions. Why indigenous people, or how indigenous people in Bolivia managed to reach power or to sustain their mobilization in order to form a particular party and reach power. So you have here X and Y, and you don't need, or you don't aim, the main target, or you don't aim at building a theory or come up with this general statement, but you need to understand how already existing theories like resource mobilization theory. It says when a movement or when a group, they manage to develop their own local organizational basis with a particular leadership, they have some sort of organizational and organizational resources, and it offers like effective communication strategies or tools in order to mobilize these groups against the national government. So you need to apply this existing theoretical framework to your case in order to understand how indigenous people or Evo Morales as a leadership managed to reach power. Or you have a different theoretical framework, says this cultural framing analysis in social movements, how actually they use their indigenous identity or to assign different meaning to the political process, how as a cocoa grower, for example, they used this in order to assign meaning, how to preserve their own culture or their attachment to lands in order to create their own movements and their own party in order to contest in elections and reach power. So you see here, you don't develop any sort of theoretical assertions or theoretical framework. You already making use of what's already there and applying this to social and some empirical cases and social and economic, social and political phenomena. One, I think Zaina wants to ask a question. No? Okay.
Doctor, you mean there is a relation between X and Y in comparative politics for a general يعني
this is
always there is a
empirical
comparative relation?
Yeah, you need,
we
but
can
except
do the relation between X and Y in any single case.
except for the cultural analysis, as I'm going to explain shortly, perhaps next lecture. Okay. Yeah. So that's why I make this distinction between explanation, causal explanation, and understanding. Because if you remember this division between the hard science and soft science, okay, this will remain with us. Okay, because there is a division. How to do we need to reach this kind of scientific theory? So the main purpose of doing comparative research as a comparativist, to build a scientific theory, or just to understand and to make, this kind of produce narrative. Okay, so this is the difference between like social hard science and soft science. And for some, like soft,
Doctor.
it's not a science. Yeah.
حضرتك قلتي دلوقتي to build a scientific theory or هو أنا ليه هبلد theory وأنا أصلا عندي existed
we are coming. I haven't finished yet. Okay, I haven't.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so we have different purposes, of doing comparative research. A theoretical purpose that might have theoretical, and you can produce some narrative. It's still soft, but it might have, it might deepen your understanding, and it might have some sort of empirical and theoretical implications. Or you might have already existing theories, and you need to apply this to different cases, okay, to interpret or to explain some cases. But in other cases, you have a different purpose. You have like a theory-oriented purpose. You need to generate new hypotheses to be tested in order to build a new theory. Okay, so the already existing frameworks, conceptual or theoretical frameworks, do not actually help you understand or explain the existing phenomenon or the one you are interested in. So that's why you might have like vague notion about something. For example, why political opposition in Tunisia managed to get together in order to make this smooth transition, while political oppositions in Egypt, they behaved a little bit, they behaved totally in a different way, and actually that ignited some sort of conflict and led to the enactment of authoritarian regimes in Egypt, while Tunisia led some sort of smooth transition. So the existing theories would mention something about the role of religion or political Islam. Okay, but why Nahda, like it's similar to the Brotherhood here in Egypt, behaved differently? Okay, so you didn't find some sort of convincing theory in the existing literature. So that's why you need to generate new hypotheses to be tested in these cases that would help in theory building process. So, for example, you can make this hypothesis about the balance of power between different camps of political oppositions. So, because there is kind of a balance of power between Islamist and non-Islamist in Tunisia, so that's why the Ennahda actually and the other kind of non-Islamist oppositions, they developed this moderate understanding or orientation towards the democratization process or the transition game. But in Egypt, because of there is kind of power asymmetry or the imbalance of power between Islamist and non-Islamist, so that's why it led to some sort of dominance of the Islamists, and that's why non-Islamists actually behaved differently and tried to and actually took an action in order to put an end to this democratic or transition game. So the already existing theories do not help you understand what happened in some context or in some countries, and that's why you need to develop your own comparative research design in order to generate new hypotheses, and that would help in building a new or contributing to building a new theory. Or you have already some theoretical frameworks, but some particular cases would give a hard, we call like hard test or hard cases that would confirm or infirm these theoretical frameworks or theoretical buildings. So you need to single out, you need to understand, you need to examine in some detail these cases that would confirm the theories or infirm, would prove or confirm or disprove, you know, these theories. For example, if you have a theory about ethnic mobilization, this kind of politicization of ethnicity would lead to some sort of ethnic mobilization or a support for ethnic leadership. Okay, especially when they were kind of deprived of access to economic resources. Okay, so like supposedly this is a theory, and then you find, you know what, in some context or in some countries, they have this kind of political leadership that they tried repeatedly to mobilize some supporters on ethnic or along, you know, these kind of ethnic lines, and these ethnic groups, they don't have access to economic resources, but they didn't respond to this. Okay, so we need to study this theory, this hard case, in order to infirm, you know, the already existing, or in some other cases the conditions did not exist, but actually some other here with the ethnic voting, for example, if you have a theory that would say, you know what, with this kind of different ethnic groups would vote for their leadership or with their ethnic affiliated parties, for example. But you find that if the theory exists that says that, you know what, if there is kind of overlapping, like ethnic with like class membership, for example, Alawi in Syria, they relate, they might, as an ethnic group, they relate to Alawi as an ethnicity, but Sunni merchants as well. They might have some commonality with the Alawis with regard to this kind of merchant class. So both of them, like Alawi and Sunni, they might relate or they might fall under this category of economic or merchant class, regardless of this kind of ethnic affiliation. So that's why you might find Sunni merchants, you know, supported Bashar. So that's why you need to examine how these cases or empirical cases would confirm or infirm the existing theoretical frameworks. And with this regard, you have deviant cases, for example. All the conditions, the necessary and sufficient conditions, they do exist just to have this ethnic voting, but the theory or the actually this country or the groups in this country, they didn't actually, despite the fact that they meet, you know, these conditions, you didn't find the outcome. For example, in Paraguay, peasants, if you have like deprived peasants, the actually the displaced, you know, peasants from their lands, they would actually form a movement in order to ask for more land appropriation. They might, you know, pressure their national government in order to ask for more demands. So if this is the theory, and it didn't happen, so displacement, harsh crackdown, all the conditions actually they are already there in this particular case, but actually you didn't find the outcome. So it might be kind of a deviant case you need to study in order to refine existing hypotheses. You might come up with a totally different hypothesis to be tested in other cases. So you might find, you know what, I don't need to examine, you know, the property, land property structure or repressive capacity. I might need to focus on the party system, how the linkage between existing parties to social constituencies actually established and endured. This might explain why the peasants, you know, that are actually demobilized in a context you need, or you expected to find high degree of mobilization in this country. Okay?
Doctor,
Yeah.
I can't understand what the meaning of deviant.
Okay. You have the, you know what it means in Arabic, right?
لا
That
ما
deviated from, yeah. Deviant. Yeah, it's kind of, okay. So you have a rule, okay? And everyone, if I mention, okay, you guys, you have to, I'm not gonna admit anyone after 10 minutes, okay?
yeah, okay.
So
Okay.
everyone logged onto, you know, the Zoom website or application 10 minutes before, and then each and every time you requested, you know, you sent, you know, like a request to me after 15 minutes. So you deviated, you know, from the pattern. Or
Okay, I get it. Thank you.
yeah. Okay. So I need to understand why it took kind of. It's a pattern, okay? So I imposed my authority, and I asked you several times, you know, to be on
Doctor.
time. And then each and every time, one single student would actually repeatedly would ask to jump in or to get admitted, you know, a little bit late. So I need to understand this behavior.
Okay.
Doctor.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if there is a technical problem forced me to log out, you will let me in again?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was just using this to explain, you know, what deviant means, okay? Okay. So this is like, you know, for some sort of single cases, for it might have different theoretical and empirical implications. But if we need to formulate a research design between different cases, we need some sort of guidance. So I cannot, like, if I need to understand like civil wars, so I cannot like select like Syria, Yemen, Libya, and some countries in Latin America, and that's it. Okay, I should have like a logic that guides me guides me in selecting, you know, these cases. So it offers some sort of guidance to make, you know, this selection to start with, and then how I implement or carry out this comparison between different cases, and for what purpose as a second step. So here, and you will study this in your methodology course, supposedly. So the most prominent or the most famous tools, it's the most similar and the most different system design. What does this mean? Okay, let me show you the table first. So here I have, supposedly, this is like for like to simplify things for you, but I should have like more than 2 cases, okay? So I need to examine, after the Arab Spring, why Syria actually slipped into the civil war and Egypt managed to stabilize the political system. So I have like different outcomes, different dependent variables. I need to explain. I need to understand what causal mechanisms led to this outcome. So what kind of X would help you understand why happened. So I gathered information or some facts about the key characteristics about these cases. So both of them, they have the same regime type. They have one dominant party system, okay, the NDP in Egypt and the Ba'ath Party in Syria. With regard to the economic structure, they might have the same, that it's not like non-oil based, and it has like, you know, both of them, they didn't have this extensive industrial basis. They might focus on commercial and service sectors in order to enable or to boost their economic growth. For like previous foreign wars, both of them, they had like a war with Israel. But when it comes to society, Egypt is much more, it has like a harmonious society. They enjoy, in Egypt, the Egyptian society enjoys a high degree of harmony between its components or different social groups than in Syria, that they had like this kind of division between Alawis and Sunni. So they are similar in roughly like every aspects, but they are different in only one variable or only one aspect. So I actually qualify this kind of variable as an X, as an independent and explanatory variable that would help me understand how X causes Y, how this degree of harmony in society leads to different outcomes after the regime breakdown or after the initiation of the mass mobilizations. Okay, so that's why, because of this kind of, this is for example, okay, because of this kind of the social composition in Syria is different from social composition or the social makeup in Egypt. So this would help me understand why they have like different outcomes. So they are similar in different aspects or in different variables. So I control for these variables, I control for regime type, I control for economic structure, I control for previous foreign wars, and then I qualify this kind of the variable that they are that's different in these two cases in order to be account for the causality between the main cause.
Doctor.
Yeah.
Sorry for interruption, but Yara want a permission to log in again.
Okay, you can. I haven't received. Yeah. Okay.
Type, Doctor, I have one question.
Yeah. Who's talking?
Yara.
Yara. Okay.
How can I determine the variables of comparison?
Yeah, it's the skill you need to develop, and that's why I mentioned you need to know like all the details about these countries. Okay, but I don't want to like confuse you at this point. You might have like, yeah, okay, I might, I need to explain you the inductive, logic first, but it's kind of, you might have like a theory would guide you what kind of variables you need to gather. Okay, so here, for example, you don't care about, for example, like the relationship between like Bashar al-Assad and his wife. Okay, it doesn't have something to do with the outcome. Okay, so you need
it doesn't make sense.
Sorry,
it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, so you have like some sort of like theoretical guidance as well in your head. Okay, so if you need like a different example, if you need to examine, if you have like this kind of general statement, you need to prove like the relative autonomy of the state, for example, like how, but this is like, it would be a difficult example. Okay, let me focus on this example as well. So here you have like, after gathering, some facts and information about these two countries, you need to focus on this state-society relation, but you don't know what exactly in state-society relation would account for this outcome. So this would give you kind of signposts, what kind of information or what kind of variables you need to focus on. You see the point? Yara?
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so it might have some sort of correlation with your why, the variable you need to explain, political stability and civil war. Okay. So perhaps like state-business relations. So you might have like a long list of the variables, and this is one of the criticism, by the way, because you actually giving weight to some explanatory variables over others. But can you think of different other variables? You guys, you might come up with a totally different variable. For example, like the composition of the military. The military in Egypt is much more professional, and it much more like harmonious as well. In Syria, this kind of ethnicity resonated even within the composition or the hierarchy or the composition of the.
We also, yeah, Doctor.
Yeah.
We also can talk about foreign intervention, because in Syria we've got Iran and Russia supported the regime there, so
yeah, yeah. So you have like this kind of foreign intervention as well. So that's why one of the major, criticism about this, you will have like, okay, in our explanation of theoretical schools, in our explanations of methodological tools, all of them, they have kind of flaws and drawbacks you need to be aware of. Okay, before you make your research design, you have to make sure that you are aware of the weaknesses or the main drawbacks or the caveats that would emanate from this research design. So here you actually single out one variable as the one would account for the outcome, but different researchers would come up with this different like independent variable or explanatory variable to understand or to formulate this causality. And this is what Lebgert mentioned, like too many variables and too few countries. So you have like too many variables, and you need like if even you expand this comparative boundary to include more cases, it's still like too many variables you need to handle. Okay.
So, Doctor, I have a question related to
okay,
research design.
Okay, let me finish. Let me finish this, and I'll take your questions because I might clarify other points. Okay. So we have like yeah, and this is like, it's the most similar system design because they have they share, some commonalities, and they are similar in so many variables, but we call it a method of difference because the outcome variable is different in two countries. Okay, the one you explain is different, so that's why it's a method of difference, but it's the most similar system design. So the method of similarity or the most different system design, the logic is quite the opposite. So you select cases that they have the same, they are similar with regard to the y, the outcome variable, but when it comes to the axis or the explanatory and control variables, they are different.
Please, I have a lecture. Doctor, we have a lecture.
Okay, I just need to finish this, and then you can go. If you want to leave, and then you can listen to the MP4, you can go ahead. Because I spent some time to sort out this Zoom technical issue every time. So I need just 5 minutes to wrap up. So here you need like they are different in all of these variables. And you're here looking for one similar variable. It's quite the opposite logic, okay? So for example, you need to compare Syria to Bahrain, and why both of them, they have foreign intervention, okay? Why both of them, they are vulnerable to this kind of foreign intervention or penetration from different external forces. So you hear, they are different in so many aspects. Regime type, Bahrain is a monarchy and Syria is a republic. Economic structure, Bahrain is like oil-based economy, and Syria, even they had like some oil reserve, but it didn't, after the 90s, the economy is not like centered on oil industries or oil production. The legacy of opposition in Bahrain, like Sunni and Shia, they are kind of, the opposition is kind of cross-cutting. So the opposition, it's not like Shia only opposing Al-Khalifa, but even Sunni might oppose Al-Khalifa as well. So the legacy of opposition in Syria, it's only Islamists and the Brotherhood. It's kind of a cohesive bloc that would form kind of threat or impose kind of, it's kind of threatening force to the Ba'athist or the Ba'ath party in Syria. But what the actually when it comes to minority rule, both of them, they have minority rule. Like Sunni in Bahrain, they actually govern or have Sunni groups. They have like kind of politically predominant, and they control over the majority of Shia. In Syria as well, the Alawi as a minority, they have like some sort of political dominance over a majority of Sunni majority. So that's why this would make like political regimes vulnerable, or they might seek some sort of support from regional players or strong regional players in order to stabilize their regimes. For Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, for example, and in Syria, Iran, in order to support, you know, their ethnic ruling circle, like Sunni in Bahrain and Shia in Syria. Do you see the point?
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mean that the countries هي اللي بتحكم ان انا هستخدم any system different ولا similar?
Yeah, from the information, you have a theory, you need to interpret a particular political phenomenon, right? Okay. And then you gather some information. You might need to avail yourself of all the details about these countries, okay? And then you need to formulate your research design. Okay. So you have, so the first step, gaining knowledge about or like gathering facts about the cases under investigation. Okay. In addition to the existing literature and the existing theoretical frameworks that would help you understand the main purpose of the research, confirming or infirming existing theories, generating new hypotheses, or perhaps this is a case is a deviant from all the sufficient and necessary conditions are there, but it's still a deviant case. You need to refine existing theories. But the same problem lies, the same problem here. What about multiple causation? Can you think of different, you know, other variables that would account for the different outcome? So perhaps it's a minority rule and the composition of the military as well. Like mercenaries in Bahrain would actually prevent Sunni from gaining kind of dominance over the military establishment. And in Syria as well, the composition or the well-entrenched, you know, powerful position of the Alawi officers actually prevented, you know, any sort of Sunni control over the military establishment. So it might be kind of multiple causation would account for this outcome. And there is a problem or a methodological caveat of selection bias. There is a problem with selecting on your dependent variable. So you opt for, you select cases that they all have foreign interventions. Okay, so you might have some sort of negative cases that they might fulfill like minority rule and you control for the same thing, but they might have different outcomes in order to give your theoretical assertions kind of harsh test. With this research design, we are going to see when we study Skocpol in the structural school, in the week when we study like structural analysis, we are going to see how Skocpol like used this most different system design differently by using some negative cases and within a case comparison in order to make it much more rigorous and to avoid, you know, these kind of methodological critiques or methodological caveats. So it's always you can find a way by being aware of these weaknesses or these caveats, you can actually overcome or you can come up with a different some sort of design in order to fill in any kind of methodological gaps. Okay, you should, I mean, you should have studied this, you know, as I mentioned, I would, if you have studied this before you take like a comparative, theories of comparative politics, theories of comparative politics, you would have find it much more easier. But I need to introduce some sort of methodological issues to you, because we are going to talk about, you know, some sort of criticism, some sort of foundation, what kind of foundational tools you need in order to make this comparative design. So that's why you need to understand this quite well, because it will remain with us throughout the course.
دكتور معلش
Yeah.
هو احنا المفروض نذاكر ازاي؟ يعني انا دلوقتي جبت الحاجه من المطبعه، انا المفروض اذاكر ازاي او انا المفروض اعمل ايه يعني؟
نفس السؤال برضه يا دكتور.
Yeah, I know. If you understand, what's the problem in like just like studying? There are kind of different frameworks of doing comparative research, and what does it mean, this methods of difference, and what kind of most similar system design, and what's the most different system design. What's the problem in this? You need it's like a step by step, and it's cumulative process. Okay, so when you write your but perhaps in your research methodology, when you write your research paper this term and next term, you will use, you know, the information or the knowledge you gain from this course. But I'm not
Doctor,
going. Yeah.
My last question is, memorizing is not important anymore in the course, but understanding is the most important thing.
Yeah. For example, if I explain something about within case comparison, so if I have Syria, and I mentioned, like, you know what, in 1991, Hafez al-Assad cracked down on Islamists. He actually quelled Islamists in Hama, okay, the uprisings in Hama. But actually in 2011 throughout, you know, 2019, these kind of uprisings and the penetration of ISIS led to a civil war. So you can make, like, within case comparison, what kind of conditions actually like prevailed in 1981, that these conditions were different from 2011, 2013. So this is within case comparison. By logic, do I need most different system design or most similar system design? If you understand, you will answer this question. So
Doctor, can you repeat the question, please?
Okay, if I ask you within case comparison, is it related to most similar system design or most different system design?
Most different system
design. This one that they have like the same outcome, or this one that they have different outcome? Logically, what I need to examine.
Different outcomes?
Different outcomes, yeah. How the regime actually, once and for all, actually quelled, you know, this uprisings in 1991, while in 2013, actually it went out of its control, right?
Yes.
So this is related to this design, not the other one.
Doctor, I'm confused.
Okay, if I ask you, I need to examine, like in Syria, okay, political regimes managed to crack down on Islamist uprisings in 1981, while it failed, you know, to between like 2011, 2014, it failed, you know, to smash or to crush Islamists. That led to like a civil war later. So what do you need to examine here? What's your outcome variable? Different outcomes, okay?
Yes, of course.
Okay, civil war and political stability, and same kind of threatening political group, okay? So this is within case, you know, comparison. So as someone mentioned, I can compare between different time periods, okay? I can break it down, you know, to different time periods in order to examine why in period A, in time period 1, this outcome happened, and in time 2, this different outcome happened. So this is what I mentioned within case comparison. So within case comparison, if you have like the same outcome, So what are you going to explain?
Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
Okay. So you see, you need just to understand the rationale behind, you know, these kind of comparative research and the purpose of doing comparative research, because we have different purpose, like from theoretical to theoretical, or even from within, you know, this theoretical purpose, we have like to generate hypotheses to be tested, or to refine, you know, existing ones, or to just to give like a hard test to existing theories. Okay, or you need to formulate a new theoretical, to come up with a new theoretical framework. Okay, so that's why it's related to methodology course. They are not, you know, separable. So that's why you need to understand this before we move forward. Okay, so the highlights here. Until now, you need to understand the causal relationship between two variables, and from these, like with this causality, you need to formulate your research design. Okay, and this research design, it could be like one single case, it depends on your purpose, or most similar or most different design, or most different system design. Okay, for now. So we do like empirical, we still like we are limited to this kind of scientific and objective knowledge, and to test, you know, some hypotheses against or to test, you know, the facts against some observations. So it's still like hard science. We didn't talk about, you know, this kind of soft science, except for the theoretical that would generate, you know, narratives, but I'm gonna talk more about this next time. Okay.
Okay, doctor.
But you have to do the readings. Okay, it's a must.
Okay, doctor, I have a question concerning the office hours.
Yeah.
If your office hours is on Wednesday, should I send you an email before the office,
preferably.
or what?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
Or I can send
doctors. Where are the readings determined?
It's in your course outline. Okay, this is like the contract between us.
After each chapter, I see the readings required.
I don't get your point.
Is it written that after each chapter, how many pages I will read?
Yeah. It's actually, I upload all the material on Moodle and on Blackboard, and hopefully things will be sorted out for you this week in order to use, you know, Blackboard as a platform. And you have like hard copies as well at the copy center at Al-Madba'a.
Okay.
So week by week, you will have like the readings available, and it's all written in detail in your course outline. Okay, so it's part of your.
Okay, Dr. Ting.
Yeah. So you have to look at the syllabus, and then you have to do the readings and the lecture. Okay, and don't worry, I'll train you in so many questions, you know, throughout the course.
Okay, doctor.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's kind of a heads up. It needs, the course needs like some effort, you know, to understand and to study. And it's a theoretical, so it's kind of dry.
Yes, it's the course in the beginning it's more complicated, so we try to make it simple.
Yeah. But as time passes by, you will like digest, you know, all the information you gather or you gain and you learn about.
Okay.
Doctor.
Okay. Yeah.
About the reading, should we read the whole chapter, or there's some important parts that we should read?
Okay, believe me, I cover all the points in your readings. Okay, so if you just understand the lecture, okay, and you take, you know, these points, and to have your own summary by fleshing out or elaborating more on the main points, and write down in your words, or you might have your own expression or your understanding, and then you might have your own like notes to study from for the final.
Okay, doctor, thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
Any more issues? But you have to do the reading, okay? All the readings. The lecture, all the lectures are not enough. Okay, because the way I explain is different from the way you are gonna write in your exam. Okay, the focus is here, or the main emphasis here are different from the exam questions. You might
Okay.
use the knowledge, you might use, if you understand what I say, you might use all the information here in order to answer the question. But if you don't understand, you're not going to answer the question. You have to understand in order to answer it. Okay, and in your term papers, by the way, you will be trained in how to apply the theories we are going to explain to some empirical cases. Okay, so it's kind of training. Okay, your reaction papers as well, it's kind of training.
Okay, doctor.
Okay. And meanwhile, if you have any question, any query, just drop me a line. And before for the office hours, I'll be online. I can send you all a link, but I prefer just to have like a specific time slots for everyone in advance, just to handle it much more efficiently. Okay.
Okay, doctor. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Yeah. See you next time. Bye.